Chapter 8. The days and nights had been empty and lonely since he lost his job. His wife left him and took the children. He didn't know when his killing spree began, but it was something inside of him that had to be filled. He couldn't fill it with the movies or watching football games or any of the other things that used to bring him comfort and a sense of self. He was no longer himself. He once had an identity, and now because of the loss of a job he felt useless. So he roamed the neighborhoods looking to punish women. The ones he found alone and harmless were his targets. Before long he had killed many women because he thought he should punish them. He didn't know why. Maybe it was to make up for that hollow feeling he got when his wife and daughters left. That's what I should have done. Killed all of them. I couldn't take care of them, but I loved life, and I didn't have the nerve to kill myself. That would have prevented all those young women from dying, the man mumbled as he placed on his shoes and then his coat, readying himself for his nightly stalking and eventual killing spree. After walking out of his door, he took a subway to Manhattan. He wouldn't dare commit a murder so close to home, although it would be more convenient. Since he was caught peeping into the girls' dorm a week ago, he thought he would let some time pass, but he was eager to return to the scene and look for another woman. He had been somewhat upset that this stranger had stopped him just when he had found the perfect girl. She reminded him of his daughters, and he could take his frustrations out on them with the girls he had, and would kill. Casually strolling past the university, the man spotted a young woman across the street with strawberry blonde hair. He could see that her eyes were green. The color of his wife's eyes. She would be his next victim, he thought. He would follow her and then make his move. The stalking was half the pleasure and the most enjoyable part. As he watched her, she appeared to be a sad girl the way she walked, looking down and perhaps thinking. The man thought he would put her out of her misery. He knew the subways and the neighborhoods of Manhattan, and especially the newly gentrified area where apartments had been refurbished overnight, and where once they were in a poor area of town. Near where he grew up as a boy. Walking to the subway, Hannah didn't feel anyone trailing behind her, and if she did, she didn't care much. She thought it was Justin stalking her. She had gotten used to him in the shadows. She thought she saw him at a distance, and when she looked back he conveniently disappeared from view. But it hadn't been only once. She hadn't seen him, nor had she seen Jovani since she moved into a condo in the East Village with Gabriella. It had been 1 week, but it felt like a lifetime. Walking down the stairs, her thoughts were on her classes. She could get in some reading, and since she had a few night classes it was perfect for her, and it was perfect for the man following her into the subway and onto the train. He sat in the next car, but he had his eyes on her, and when she stepped out of the car into the cold, damp station he was right behind her. She would walk the few blocks to the condo. She liked that Gabriella had invited her to be her roommate. They got along wonderfully. She didn't know that she would, but she did know that it wouldn't take long before she discovered that she enjoyed living with someone besides her parents. Just like it didn't take long for her to discover that she loved Jovani. But what good did it do her now? She hadn't heard from him since he hurried her out of his apartment when he had a female visitor. Hannah, occupied with her thoughts of Jovani, missed the footsteps coming quickly behind her, or the soft sound of leather on cement. As she reached the corner, her building was in sight. Only 1/2 block and she would be there. Then she noticed that someone was behind her. She rushed down the street with her building in sight, and then she ran, and when she reached the steps to the building she dug inside her bag for the key. Trembling, she retrieved the key and placed it in the lock. When the door opened she turned, and the man was gone. Hannah breathed out and then stepped on the elevator. She didn't know what that was about, and she had never been afraid to walk the streets, but this was a new neighborhood, and she knew little of the people, and she had forgotten about the man killing young women like herself, that is, until she found herself panicking, running breathlessly down the street. After she was safely in her apartment, she met Gabriella sitting in the reading room watching television. Hannah dropped her keys in the bowl in the foyer and walked up to her. "I've just had the scare of my life. I thought I was being stalked." She plopped down on the sofa near Gabriella, who was watching attentively at the news. No one is safe anywhere in Manhattan until they find those maniacs. Killing and draining blood and killing young women, and with them disappearing. Oh God, I might never leave the house. That female detective said there are 2 killers. I say it's 3. One kills the men by draining their blood. One kills young women, and who knows what he's doing that for, and another kills women and discards their bodies someplace where no one finds them. Gabriella sat with her legs curled up under her, and a bag of popcorn in her lap, and a can of Coke on the table in front of her as if she's at the movies. I thought we agreed to place the flat screen in the living room and leave this room for study. My mother sent me another television, and I didn't have the heart to tell her we don't need another one, so I placed it here, and I like to study with the television on. I don't know how you can concentrate with that thing running all the time. Can I turn it off? Sure, go ahead. I need some discipline. And you're the only one who seems to keep me focused. I have to pass my test or I'll be in school longer than I plan. My money is scarce. I can't afford one more semester. I have to graduate this spring and get a job, Hannah said. She rose and gathered a handful of popcorn and plopped it into her mouth. Oh, gourmet, Hannah said, pleased. Being around Gabriella, her taste in things were changing. She now knew the difference in regular popcorn from the grocery shelf to something bought at a higher price and with a better taste. Not as salty with special oil. But no matter how much she enjoyed the taste of the gourmet stuff, she couldn't get a certain flavor out of her mouth. The flavor of popcorn in the movies as a child. I'm going into the shower. I need to wash off this afternoon. If you ask me, you're washing off your sexual frustration. Why don't you let Justin fuck you, and then you can relax? Who are you saving yourself for? Hannah laughed. Jovani? Gabriella questioned, walking behind her. Hannah rolled her eyes at Gabriella. That tall, dark, handsome, and dangerous man. Him I'd wait for if I were a virgin. I'd like for him to burst my cherry. With the doors closed behind her, she could hear all that Gabriella had said. Hannah chuckled and dropped her jeans and walked in the direction of the shower door, and before she entered, she heard Gabriella shout. Fuck yeah, he's worth waiting for. But I heard you had plenty of competition. I can wait, Hannah said before she closed the shower door and turned on the water. When Hannah stepped into the shower, Jovani stepped out of his car for his nightly walk. He had been stalking the man since he spotted him in front of the girls' dorm over a week ago. He didn't expect to see him so soon, and that's why he parked near Hannah's new home to make sure she was safe. Knowing she didn't want to see him because he tried contacting her, he thought it better to wait for her to get over that night and then approach her. He was surprised to see her coming back at night after twilight. Which was good for him but bad for her. Since she had her books, she was obviously coming from the university. Before the man had a chance to grab Hannah, Jovani stood in front of him. Where did you come from? He questioned. His voice tough and insolent. Have you been following me? Yes. And I saw you following her. The man glanced up at Jovani and searched his face. Behind that handsome exterior and a bright smile, he knew what he was. You're like me. You're stalking that girl for the same reasons I am. I beg to differ. I'm not like you, and I'm following her. The man didn't let Jovani complete his sentence. I know your kind. Do you really? I bet you've never seen my kind, Jovani said with a curl of his lips and a smirk. I look into the mirror every day, and I know what I see. And I see it in your eyes. You are a killer like me, the man said. He peered at Jovani. Haven't I seen you before? As I was saying, you've never seen anyone like me. Have you seen this before? The man's eyes grew large as Jovani's incisors extended down. And he held him with one hard, strong hand around his throat. Jovani leaned his head to the side as the man tried to scream, but the blow of his teeth sinking into his jugular paralyzed the man, and all that escaped the man's mouth was a rattle of warm breath into the cold January air. Jovani, with his head leaning to the side, his incisors extending into the man's jugular draining the man's blood, heard a gurgling sound when the man's breath left his body. Then his hands, limp and lifeless, fell from Jovani's wrist, and his heart ceased to beat after a final frantic, desperate move to stay alive. In Jovani's attempt to reach the man before he got hold of Hannah, he forgot that he was standing on the sidewalk, but there was no one near at that time. But when he glanced up, a woman had walked upon him. "What's wrong with your friend?" "Too much to drink," he said in a calm, cool voice. She kept walking when she discovered that it was someone helping a friend. Jovani watched as she looked back out of curiosity and headed up the steps to her brownstone. When she took another look, he had the man in the limo and taking him where he could dump him. Riding with the corpse, he glared at the man. Empty of everything. The only thing that kept Jovani from feeling anything was the nature of the beasts. As long as he continued feeding on these men, he would remain as cold and deliberate as they would be, and now he knew that he was more addicted to the blood of humans, and if he didn't remove that weakness from his life, then he could never hope to have a life with Hannah. If that was even possible now. "Let me out," Jovani said to his driver. "Take this body and dump it. I'll meet you before the sun rises."